All right, you're welcome to another edition of Plant a Decade Initiative. My name is Anoloapo Edo, and it's wonderful to have another session. Last session, we had quite a number of talks around forestry and some other things that are affecting forestry, especially how it relates to the climate issue. Well, yes, let me remind you that according to the most widely read newspaper in Nigeria, the Punch newspaper in 2022, which was last year, there was a publication about the fact that the federal government of Nigeria, as well as World Bank, gave a sum of 949 million US dollars for a project which was named New Map just because of erosion. And it was really massive because 23 out of 33 states in Nigeria are reportedly by the same particular newspaper to have what we have as erosion. There was so much erosion in 23 of the 33 states in Nigeria, and it was really a big and topical issue. So the federal government came with the World Bank to set up that particular project, New Map, just to tackle that. But again, the question would be, why should we go towards that end? Why should we let things, get disrupted before we start processes of making things right? The future is cheap, like I would always say, if we can buy it today. And how do we buy it today? By investing in the fabrics, the ecological fabrics of our society, by investing in forestry, by investing largely and expensively in the things that can, help us ameliorate our environment. And that's why we have to plant trees. Of course, we cannot overemphasize the fact. And of course, today it's another day to have a discussion, a conversation as regards, planting trees and all of that. Yes, we have a topic before us today, which is quite an interesting one to note. Of course, why study forestry? Why should we care about forestry? Why care about forestry? That's exactly the topic today. And I'm not the only person doing this. I have an eminent professional, a researcher, someone I so much revere, someone of repute, absolutely. And she's joining in from Puerto Rico right here in the studio, and I'm in Nigeria, and we're going to have this discussion together. And again, she's the executive officer of the International Society of Tropical Foresters across, of course, you say globally. Yes, so global, ISTF global, like we know. And of course, she's going to be helping us into what ISTF is doing at the moment and some of the works they've done in the past, which is one of the reasons why we are having her. We are so pleased to have her. She finished from, I think her first degree was in College of St. Benedict, and also a master's was in Northern Arizona University, where she studied master's biology, if I'm so sure about that. University of California, Davis, PhD ecology. And it's beautiful to have that particular personality in the house today. And you would also want to know that, of course, Nigeria is in the tropics. And so why should we talk about tropical forest? Because Nigeria is part of the tropical regions of the world, and that is why we need to talk about this. Of course, my project was centralized on deforestation and climate change, and in the particular sphere where we are, or your state particularly, my research noticed that there was so much deforestation in Nigeria, especially in Oyo State, and it was quite massive how that at least about thousands of hectares of land are being deforested. Why do we have this? Yes, we have this because we have a teeming population to feed. Nigeria is reportedly a 200 million people country, and you don't want to joke with that number. Of course, we have people, still giving birth daily. We need to feed these people. We need to shelter these people. So we need to do all that. But why should we infringe on the rights of our mother nature, if so to say, on the right of trees? And that's why we'll be having these conversations. Of course, we also talk about the fact that tropical rainforests are home to over half of the world's plants and animals. Of course, another article would say vertebrate species, about 62% of the vertebrate species in the world are domiciled in that particular biome, like we call it. So, of course, we also know that 30 million people live in the Amazon. Amazon forest actually is it has about 10% of all the species we know of in the world, and it's quite massive how that it's not just that it's just a place where people stay. Of course, about 30 million people are staying in the Amazon forest. Of course, it's the largest tropical rainforest in the world. You want to talk about 8 or 9 countries, that are sharing borders with that particular biome, the ecological zone. So it's quite a massive thing to discuss tropical rainforests, especially now when climate issue is on the high, where climate action needs to be enforced, to be many works to be done, and all of that. So we'll be getting into that with Dr. Sheila Ward today. Like I said, she's joining from Puerto Rico, and we'll be having this conversation right immediately. So I want to welcome on board Dr. Sheila Ward, la bienvenida a bordo, if so to say.
Hello?
Hello, Sheila. Yes, you're welcome on the show. Yes.
Oh, very good. Very good. Good to be with you today.
I'm excited to be here too. All right, so let's have you discuss some of these things. Let's start about with ecosystem restoration. We know this is quite important to the topic we are discussing today. Why should we care about forests? Why should we have forests? We know ecosystem restoration is something we should talk about because, like I rightly said, deforestation rates is so high. Nigeria is rated to be losing about 3.7% of its total forest area every 12 months, every 1 year, which is quite an alarming one to note. So let's talk about ecosystem restoration.
Well, first off, when you're talking about ecosystem restoration, you need to first clarify what you mean. Do you mean restoring trees in general via plantations? Or do you mean restoring the actual species of the ecosystem that were in an area previously? I think both approaches are legitimate. There's reasons for doing reforestation focused on production, even monoculture or limited polyculture with certain productive species. There's reasons for promoting industrial forestry and doing reforestation for those purposes. But ecosystem restoration is a much more complex concept. It involves bringing back in the species that had been in an area previously and restoring the ecosystem functions, ecosystem services of an area that has been degraded or even denuded. And that takes a lot of work. And that is actually the goal of the UN during this period of until 2030.
We're asking a question at first about what exactly the pinpoint is for us, but now I understand how you have made it general. You have expressed your take, your insight into some of these that I would like to ask about. But yes, let's go more deeper into these. Of course, we know the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and every other goals. We are one of the targets, especially climate action, which is Agenda 13 of the goals, is particularly to curb, climate mitigation, to look for ways where we can, reduce emissions, do more of carbon sequestration. And we cannot talk about that unless we start a topic, a discussion about trees. How important is a tree or are trees to the fabrics of the ecological society that we have at the moment?
Well, the trees in well, as you know, there's different types of ecosystems running from ocean forests of kelp, seashore ecosystems, deep sea vents, to savannas, deserts, temperate forests, tundra, tropical forests. But for forested ecosystems, the trees are the key species because they provide the habitat structure and the microenvironments and the amelioration of environmental conditions for everything else that occupies the forested space. And trees can also be really important for human constructed ecosystems, such as urban areas, urban forests. So trees are key for providing ecosystem services in many ways for humans and other species.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, let's talk about, I was going through some of the things you've done, and I saw that ISTF is quite intentional about, sustainable use of forest resources and conservation across board. It's one of the interests of this particular society, which is of note, and we need to talk about that as well. How we know the situation, of course, around trees, around ecosystem. It's quite massive, especially for instance in Nigeria. Many of the ways we exploit trees, particularly the way, let's say, harvest, the way we harvest trees is not it's not hygienic to the health of the ecosystem. We know we should not do some things at the expense of the other. When we try to log, when we try to harvest trees, sometimes we encroach into the fabrics of the biome, the ecosystem in general. We do tamper with biodiversity. So how can we go from there? How can we strike a balance of trying to get these things right so as not to disrupt the process, the community process of a forest area?
My opinion, and the opinion of certain organizations, is that our tropical forest cover as it is right now, that is in relatively intact, is so limited that most of those forests should be protected. There are plenty of places that should be restored as well. But when we're talking about industrial forestry and harvesting trees, it is possible to maintain most ecosystem functions and biodiversity and do industrial, which means cutting trees for sale. But it needs to be done in a targeted way over a wide area. You cannot harvest intensely in a small space and expect to maintain all the functions of the ecosystem. These principles were developed back in the 1990s by the Tropical Forest Foundation, and there are manuals available for sustainable logging, low impact logging, they call it. So I'd be happy to share those resources out with your audience so that they could understand how to apply such things as good road design, understanding felling, what kind of areas to leave alone, leaving enough seed sources, being conscious of genetic variation, but also creating appropriate regeneration areas for species that require, that demand light, such as the mahoganies. The New World and the African mahoganies require light for regeneration.
Yeah, thank
so there's
you.
many things that need to come into concern. Yes.
All right. Thank you about that. Speaking of mahogany, we need to talk about it because, of course, you've you've had some research, particularly on that species. And just when we started PADI, like we used to say on this particular program, that our primary focus is bifurcated into two main goals. The first, which is to bridge the information and knowledge gap on climate education. And the second, which is to plant 10,000 trees in 10 years, which is why we have Plant a Decade initiative. The decade is the 10 part of it. And I remember the first project we did in Benue State, Nigeria, was that we donated 111 tree species of mahogany, particularly to the NYS, National Youth Service Corps in Nigeria. We donated it to that particular corporation, that body, to plant during the rains, which of course they are planting as we speak, which is quite a thing to really appreciate. So let's talk a bit about your mahogany research. Of course, we know there are two species of that particular genus in Nigeria as we speak. We have Kaya senegalensis and Kaya ivorensis. Let's speak about some of the works you've done on it, Sheila Ward.
I have not worked specifically on African mahogany. I have done work on the genetic conservation and variation in New World mahoganies, Switania, in particular Switania macrophylla. In the New World, you have more species in the subfamily Switanoideae, the mahoganies per se, in Africa than we have in the New World. In the New World, we have only 3 species. The mahogany in the Caribbean, which is the mahagani, Switania mahagani, the big leaf mahogany, which runs from Mexico down to Brazil, Switania macrophylla, and the Pacific coast, which runs mahogany, which runs along the dry coast of Central America, from Mexico to Costa Rica, Swetania humilis. Those are our 3 species. And they've all 3 been listed now. Well, they're all at least in Appendix 2 of CITES, which means trade is controlled so that theoretically they are being harvested sustainably, and then the timber is marked so that when it's export, it can be tracked. Now, this doesn't always work. There's still a fair amount of illegal cutting going on, but it's a move in the right direction towards maintaining the resource. We hope that in Africa, that you can also be looking at maintaining the supplies of your species. You are losing most of your big trees of these native mahoganies in Africa, and the resource needs to be secured for the future, both as a resource for people and for the health of the ecosystems. And I hope that African nations, the range countries, can move to get their species of the mahoganies and Tandophragma, Kaya, and Lavoa listed in Africa in CITES so that the trade in those species can be regulated for the sake of conserving the species, both for the future, both for people to be able to make money off of it, frankly, but also for the health of these ecosystems, maintaining these species. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, once again. Speaking of making money from mahogany, can we know what your particular variety of mahogany? Can we know the commercial prospect of that particular tree species, so as to compare with what we have to see if exactly we have the same?
No, you don't have, the African mahogany is a completely different thing. I mean, it's a different genus. The Swetania is the genus in the New World. Your African mahoganies are Kaya and then Tandophragma, and I think Lavoa is in that same subfamily, although it has a different commercial name. But it is a different, they have similar features. They're both, all these species are susceptible to Hypsipyla, the mahogany shoot borer that occurs. There's one species in the New World, one species in the Old World, but all the species are common that they're susceptible to it for their early growth patterns. That's what makes it difficult to grow them in plantations. But you have a different species. The New World mahogany, in my understanding, is considered to be very high quality cabinet wood, maybe the highest quality in the world. But the African mahoganies are also extremely high value quality woods.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so very much once again. Just to wrap up, let's see a few questions, particularly, I was trying to think about some of the things that you do in ISTF, International Society of Tropical Forests. Let's help us into some of the projects and the things you do so as to make every other person to be in the know as to what you do.
Okay, well, we are ambitious. We're more ambitious than we've got capacity for, but we have to grow it all out together, correct? We now have 2,300 members in 110 countries. We have 10 chapters, 3 in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and Rwanda, and others in Asia and the New World. We are hoping to grow those chapters out, encourage more members. Our goal is to be an information sharing collaborative network to help people get the information they need for their projects on the ground, for restoration, for sustainable forestry, for conservation. So we're trying to get that information out there. And so we're building our networks. It's a struggle. We're building the networks to be able to achieve these goals, but we do have a lot of information already available. For example, yesterday we did the second session on tropical fuel woods, and we had 4 speakers focused on 3 countries in Africa and in Haiti in the Caribbean, and the issues faced by 70% of the people in Nigeria still use fuel wood. And this is a big issue. It's a big issue in all around the world in the tropics, but it's kind of a sleeper issue. People don't pay a lot of attention to it, but it's a major key to resource utilization and conservation to address the issues, the needs of people for appropriate fuel sources, more efficient stoves, and it's important for human health. So this is the kind of thing, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see the range of things we've addressed so far in various online symposia. Another one, last year we did something on restoration. We've had several sessions on forest restoration. And now those are on our YouTube channel. We are making various resources available. ISTF actually goes back to the 1950s, and we have the entire collection of newsletters available in our virtual online library. on our Google Drive, and that's available for anybody who wants to get any of the resources that we have, including the publications that are related to TFF's programs, former programs on sustainable logging. We have accumulated those resources to be available to people. We're very eager to share information, get it out there for restoration, sustainable forestry, and conservation of our tropical forest resources. And we want to collaborate broadly with as many people as possible. All are welcome to join who are interested in the topic, and membership is free.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for that. So it's been a wonderful time having you on this particular edition. And just you were saying many things. Of course, we talked about moving from stove to deforestation, if that's exactly what you meant. And currently in the news today, a particular kilogram of gas in Nigeria, cooking gas now, goes for 1,200 naira. I wish I could have the time to just check that into how much of dollars that is. Of course, the many persons are already living below the poverty level. Of course, the poverty line is so we can infer from this that is going to the rate of poverty or poverty-stricken people is going to increase in the country, because if the price of cooking gas goes for 1,200. Remember, just a few weeks back or few months back, it was sold around 500, 600. Now it's over 100% increment. And you can imagine how much of pressure will come back to the forest base, to the resource base we have. People will need to get into the forest. People will need to encroach into ecological zones and bring out firewood from there. It's quite a shocking and an appalling situation that we need to tackle in Nigeria. Many of these details are very important to the development of the fabrics of this nation. And like we always say on this show, that we are working towards achieving a sustainable environment, towards achieving a green space for everybody to live, which is quite laudable if you think about that. And of course, you spoke about many things, and I could infer from many of the things that ISTF is doing is, of course, you are focused on forest-based management practices, which is quite all-encompassing. It's quite comprehensive in its nature, how that it understands the different fabrics, the different sectors, the different operations in forestry, or particularly, let's say, ecological harvesting, as it were. So it takes into consideration every other thing that needs to be taken into consideration. So that is why I feel like, very importantly, ISF is doing a very great job. Of course, we don't need to, of course, a feather in your cap for that. We don't need to cap on it, but it's fine. It's actually amazing. And we need to emulate, especially countries around Africa, countries called developing countries of the world. We need to up our game as well. We need to do something to this effect. And that's it today. Thank you so very much once again. Just in case you want to know, you are on PADI. This is PADI. We call PADI Plant a Decade Initiative, which is actually an initiative led by myself and a group of young minds. We are focused on planting 10,000 trees in 10 years and also bridging the information and education gap on climate education, actually in this climate, Nigeria and the rest of Africa as we have. It's been a wonderful time having Dr. Sheila Ward on this edition today, where we discussed quite a number of things about why should we care about forests. Now, I know someone out there is very concerned now about forestry. Someone out there would want to say to his younger brother or sister, you need to study forestry. Absolutely. It's quite a wonderful time once again. Thank you so very much, Sheila Ward. Your parting word, if you would like.
I just appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that some of the young people and older people who are tuned into this get a little more interested in the environment around them and the species, and curious about it, as well as wanting to restore it and conserve it. The curiosity is a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you so very much once again. Thank you so very much. This is Immaculate Television, ITVS. Thank you so very much for staying tuned. See you next time on the next edition. Remember, it is towards achieving a sustainable environment, a green space, and also a better place for humanity as well as for Mother Nature. Thank you so very much once again. I remain Anolo Akwo, your forest communicator and your climate action advocate. Take care of you.